I'm Alex Cagnoni, Director of Authentication at WatchGuard Technologies, and today I'm here to present part 2 of our webinar series Dark Web 101. I will be continuing the interview with an expert in the field, Marc Laliberte, a Senior Security Analyst at WatchGuard Technologies, now going deeper on credentials, passwords, and breaches on the dark web. Let's check out part 2. Welcome everyone, thanks for joining this webinar where we will make a scary deep dive right into the dark web. For that topic, today I'm interviewing a specialist in this area, our Senior Security Analyst at WatchGuard, Marc Laliberte. As a user, I found out that some of my credentials ended up in the dark web. Was it my fault?
No, it is rarely your fault unless you are following poor password practices. Most of these breaches happen because the organization that you signed up for an account with had poor security practices and their database got dumped. That said, there is still a class of breaches that result from the bad guys basically just trying every single username and password combo they can think of. And if your password is weak, then they can potentially brute force that password and it will end up in one of these breaches. But like you and I, and hopefully everyone else, we're good at picking strong passwords. We use password managers maybe, so that as long as we have that, like a strong password, these breaches aren't our fault. They still impact, obviously. They still impact us, obviously. But it's like I don't hit myself up over it for having one of my accounts breached, for example.
Okay. And I'm always reading the news about breaches involving different companies and customer information ending up in the dark web. How often does it happen, and are those always put for sale?
Yeah, they happen every day. There are breaches from big and small companies every single day, and we don't even usually find out about them until months or years after the fact. There's been a few rash breaches in the past few months or so that have popped up almost immediately, but in general, usually the attackers will sit on this data that they steal and they'll find the most valuable accounts and then use those to go breach other sources. Like a really good example of this was back in 2007, I believe, when LinkedIn suffered a data breach, which resulted in the loss of 114 million accounts. One of those accounts, for example, was an employee for Dropbox.com. And they had used the same weak password for their LinkedIn account as they used for their corporate Dropbox account. So this same hacker was then able to hack into Dropbox and breach them as well. That's pretty much par for the course. The people that breach these databases will then take their credentials, find maybe celebrities or employees of other tech companies, and then try and use those credentials to hack those organizations or people as well. And then once they've basically taken all the good stuff, they bundle it up and sell it on the dark web for X amount of money, and then it shows up for free for anyone to get.
Yeah, most people use the same password everywhere, so I guess it happens a lot of times. Now, considering the current state of the world, the pandemic, work from home everywhere, did it change how things are done in the dark web, and what changed?
It hasn't necessarily changed how things are done on the dark web, but it did, this quick transition we had where organizations had to quickly move from primarily in the office to remote workers, opened up a lot of opportunities for attack, made organizations a lot more vulnerable as they quickly stood up these remote access resources. And that just fuels more of these breaches, especially if they're not backing up their access with things like multi-factor authentication. It leaves them wide open to attacks, both to steal credentials and use stolen credentials to then steal other data as well.
Okay, so there are several tools in the web that can be used to check if a given email or emails from a given domain were exposed in the dark web. And you created a service like that within WatchGuard. How do you check it out?
Yeah, so you can access our dark web scanner through WatchGuard Cloud. It's under the administration menu. And basically, you can search for an email or a domain and get information on the breaches that those accounts have been a part of. Now, we restrict a lot of the detailed information behind verification. You have to prove you own the email address you're looking for, or you have administrative control over the domain in order to view some more of the detailed info. But even the basic reports will give you a good idea of just how many of these breaches you've been a part of, and then hopefully clue you to go change your password if it's something that you share that password with other services as well.
Now, if a breach database is made available in the dark web, but only for sale, you mentioned that it happens all the time. Do you also get a copy of it? What happens next?
So our policy in WatchGuard Threat Lab right now is that we do not fund cyber criminals. So if a breach is only available for purchase, we are not going to acquire that to stick it in our dark webs tool because we don't want to incentivize further cyber criminal actions. That said, the good news, or I guess like really bad news, is usually breaches that go up for sale, they usually end up popping up for free within like a week afterwards. As soon as someone buys it, they want to get notoriety for themselves, so they go post it on some underground forum entirely for free. So that's when we're able to then get it, add it to our tool, and notify our users that they have been the victim of a breach when they start looking through the dark web scanner.
Okay. And then as a company, I might want to know if and when my users have been exposed through breaches made available in the dark web, since I can trust that they are using different passwords for everything, like you said. How often should I check? And if someone were exposed, what should I do about it?
Sure. So as for how often you should check, frequently. Like I look through pretty often, weekly, monthly at the worst, just so I can have an idea of which of my accounts have been exposed. Luckily, I use a password manager, so I don't really have to worry about changing all my other passwords if one of my accounts has been the part of a breach. But it's still good to stay up to date on it so you know when you might need to go change a password somewhere. What you should do when you find out you've been the victim of a breach, I just hinted at it, change that account's password immediately. And then if you reused that password anywhere else, make sure you change those accounts as well. That way the attacker isn't able to use your stolen credentials in a credential stuffing attack against those other services.
Yeah, that's a good advice. Now, let's use your tool and check as an example a domain in here. I will not show it just because of privacy. Let me check with my computer. Okay, I can see that users with email from this domain were exposed on 2 breaches just this year. Obviously, I don't work in IT within that company, so I can see which ones. But if I'm in that company, what should I do about it?
Yeah, so if you work and you have administrative control over that domain, you can request a report, which will include some more detailed information on which accounts were a part of the breaches, which breaches they were, and even redacted passwords that were a part of that breach as well. We do verification by sending an email to one of a few really common administrative emails like security @ or webmaster @ or whatever. You have to prove that you have access to that email, which generally means you have administrative control of that domain, and then you can get the more detailed report.
Okay, now I'm curious. The moment someone finds out a breach database is available in the dark web is not the same moment the breach occurred, right? That's what you said. I mean, there could be days, maybe weeks, with the information out there where hackers could use before it becomes public.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like you said, days, weeks, it can even be months or years between when the breach actually occurred and when it shows up publicly on some underground forum. And during that time, the original threat actor is using that data to conduct additional breaches or just selling off the most valuable records individually to other cyber criminals. So usually, like by the time it pops up, it's too late to save that one account, but you still need to make sure that you go and change those passwords and change any other accounts that share passwords, because now that available is out there for free and anyone can use it. Any criminal can then take it to try and get into your other accounts. It really highlights the need for both multi-factor authentication, but then also just good password practices of not sharing your same credentials between accounts.
And that's a good point. You know that MFA is what I do, and I'm a total believer that if you protect your users' credentials with multi-factor authentication, this will reduce the chance of a breach in your company in case an employee's password is exactly the same used on that recent breach service. What are your thoughts on that? What else can users do?
Yeah, so MFA, first and foremost, you should be enabling it on any account that you have it available. Obviously, there's different levels of multi-factor authentication, some being more secure than others. Like SMS-based, so text message-based multi-factor isn't actually that great anymore, but it's still better than nothing. So if you only have that as an option, make sure you enable it. Also, just good password practices. If you work in IT and you manage your company's password policies, make sure you allow password managers because password managers really help your users pick those strong and unique passwords for each individual account. And then if you're an end user, yes, again, use password managers. That way, if one of your accounts get breached, it doesn't mean all of your accounts are going to get breached.
Okay. And would it be okay to say that I could use push-based authentication on my phone to detect a credential exposure? If I receive a push request out of the blue, maybe showing it came from a different city or even a country, a different country, I could deny it, blocking the attack. And at that point, I would know that my passwords were compromised, right?
Yeah, so push-based multi-factor authentication is great, both in that it's secure. You're using the encrypted notification channel for your mobile phone to facilitate this second factor of authentication. But also, like you said, it's just a good way to notify you if your account has been breached, or at least your password has been stolen, because you'll get that push notification out of nowhere saying, are you trying to authenticate from Moscow, Russia, for example? And you can be like, no, I'm sitting here in Seattle, Washington, and deny it, and then go change your password because it's probably been leaked somewhere.
Okay. And to end up this great conversation, if I want to sell my old socks through the web, would I make more money selling through the dark web or a site like eBay?
Well, so I guess like on the dark web, since you can better protect your identity, if your morals are a little more loose, you can probably advertise them as like a famous person's socks and get a bit more money. Whereas on eBay, if you lie, you get in a lot of trouble. So I don't know. Depends how loose your morals are.
All right. Thanks for your time, Mark. It was great. I'll buy you a pizza when I'm able to travel back to Seattle. Okay.
I'm
Thank you very
looking forward
much.
to it. Thanks,
All
Alex.
right.